On the Roman frontier in the late 2nd century, a man sits alone in a military tent. He carries absolute authority to order thousands dead, while managing a brutal war and a devastating plague. The cognitive load of this executive position is immense. To manage this pressure, he writes. These private notes were never intended for an audience or public consumption. He called these writings hupum nemata. A hupum nemata is a private, active psychological exercise, a daily practice designed to translate abstract philosophical theory into a permanent neurological habit. These exercises functioned as a necessary technology. Without them, the human mind would easily fracture under the weight of paranoia and absolute power. Modern interpretations often frame Stoicism as a series of simple life hacks. The historical reality was a comprehensive, rigorous system, grounded in advanced physics and uncompromising logic. This intellectual lineage traces back to Epictetus, an enslaved man who became a preeminent Stoic philosopher. Marcus Aurelius adopted Epictetus's structural framework entirely to manage his own mind. This framework consists of 3 distinct disciplines: the disciplines of assent, impulse, and desire. Each discipline corresponds to a specific academic field. Assent is the domain of logic, impulse is the domain of ethics, and desire is the domain of physics. The operational goal is to align the mind's ruling center perfectly with the rational order of the cosmos. The Meditations is the surviving schematic of a biological machine actively reprogramming its own default biases. This marble bust captures the physical manifestation of a man ruling an empire, while his philosophy insists external rewards are meaningless. This creates the deliberative content problem. If these external things are mathematically indifferent to your happiness, you must find a different logical basis for choosing any specific action. Stoicism solves this through oikeiosis, or appropriation. This is the instinctual, hardwired drive for self-preservation found in all animals. The practitioner cognitively forces this biological drive outward. Through logic, you expand your instinctual care for yourself to encompass all rational beings. This expansion defines the cosmopolis, a worldview where the entire universe is structurally a single, highly integrated city. This diagram shows the core operational metaphor. An individual relates to the cosmopolis exactly as a limb relates to a body. A limb acting selfishly destroys the system it requires to survive. For an emperor, ruling is the functional duty of his specific node. Acting for the communal goal is the only mathematically correct way to fulfill the virtue of justice. Marcus executed this communal duty here, in Athens, by establishing philosophical chairs. He saw education as a functional requirement for citizens of the cosmopolis. Succumbing to greed is the ultimate failure. A ruler ignoring the communal good becomes a tyrant, destroying the whole. Imperial duty is the exact ethical mechanism through which Marcus fulfills his specific cosmic function. Managing the empire required Marcus to master the micromechanics of his own cognition. Stoic epistemology posits that external reality stamps impressions, or phantasiae, onto the soul, like a seal on wax. Receiving these sensory impressions is a purely involuntary biological reflex. However, granting assent, the choice to accept an impression as true or important, is entirely voluntary. Psychological suffering is caused by the mind attaching automatic, invisible value judgments to raw sensory data. Marcus deployed the exercise of erasing impressions to fix this glitch. This illustrates physical reductionism, stripping emotionally charged stimuli down to literal components. Imperial purple robes are merely sheep's wool soaked in shellfish blood. Vented Falernian wine is just the fermented juice of a crushed grape. This analytical stripping neutralizes the psychological leverage of status and wealth. By explicitly withholding assent from the false value judgment, the practitioner discards the subjective narrative and remains with objective reality. This practice builds the inner citadel, a cognitively impenetrable fortress within the mind. Mastering assent allows Marcus to isolate and neutralize the psychological attacks of external reality, making an unpredictable world entirely manageable. The final level of Stoic training is the discipline of desire, which is rooted in physics. This discipline trains the mind to desire nothing except exactly what reality dictates in the present moment. Marcus continually forced a philosophical binary upon himself to achieve this: providence or atoms. This bust of Epicurus represents the first option, a universe governed by random, chaotic collisions of particles with no inherent meaning. The Stoic alternative is a universe operating as a hyper-rational, providential, and perfectly optimal organism. If providence is true, every event, including plague and betrayal, is structurally necessary for the cosmos to function. Resenting reality is therefore a mathematical contradiction and an act of cosmic sedition against the whole. The true practitioner moves from merely enduring a painful tragedy to actively welcoming it as a necessary requirement of nature. Recognizing the structural value of every event creates absolute psychological immunity to despair. The discipline of desire weaponizes determinism, transforming random tragedy to structural perfection. On the freezing frontier, Marcus Aurelius ran these cognitive protocols endlessly to maintain his sanity. The completed operational loop is self-sustaining. Disciplined dissent neutralizes external threats, rational impulse dictates correct action, and aligned desire accepts the fallout. This was a brutal, daily survival mechanism, carefully deployed against the relentless friction of time and human mortality. The Meditations proves that biological default states, like fear and greed, can be permanently overridden by raw logic. It remains the most pristine record of a human mind successfully rewriting its own operating system in the face of absolute power and inevitable extinction.